to the Green Commodities Community virtual workshop on reinventing farmer support system for the 2030 agenda. Welcoming Riftan, welcome. So my name is Nicolas Petit, and I'm working for UNDP as Senior Commodities Advisor, and I'm based in Hong Kong. And I very much look forward to this session together. That was actually quite fun to prepare on my side. We have more people joining. I'm adding them at the same time. All right, and so we have 90 minutes together. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a role play, and we're gonna use some digital collaboration tools that you might know or might not know yet. And we're gonna explore the newly launched UNDP Farmer Support Toolkit that you receive with the invite for this webinar. And it's basically a guidance on how you can strengthen farmer support systems in your respective countries or commodities you're working with. But in the particular case of applying collaborative methodologies and system change approach. And so how do we create a safe space for stakeholders to design innovative and adaptive solutions? So if you can, for the people who just join us, if you can click next to your name, you see 3 little dots, and if you can just add next to your name your organization. Thank you for putting the video and the nice background. This is great, I love it. People in the countryside, people with palm oil behind them. Yeah, this is great. Riftan, click next to your name to put your organization. We have ProForest, TNC, a lot of colleagues from Indonesia, etc. So next slide. Matthias, if you can share the presentation, and the next slide, you can see the agenda. So we're gonna have basically 90 minutes together, and there's gonna be 10 minutes of check-in. Then we're gonna go into the role play, and I'm gonna present the toolkit that you received. Then we're gonna do an assessment of an existing farmer support system in the fictional Republic of Kambezi. Now we cannot travel with COVID, but I suppose nobody went to the Republic of Kambezi because it doesn't exist. But that's going to be the role play, and we're going to do some feedback on that, and then we're going to start looking at co-creating an improved farmer support systems for that Republic of Kambezi, and then we're going to do some checkouts. So 90 minutes together. And next slide, Matthias. The way we start usually any meetings, you will see during the meeting today, is that the ways of working are very important for us. And so we always start with a check-in. And the idea of the check-in is to get to know each other better and not jumping straight into technical content. You know, farmer support is a very technical, heavy content, as you know, for those of you who work on it. So it's more having the opportunity to connect as a group, being more present and forget what's in our mind in this particular moment. So we're gonna have breakout rooms in pairs. I think we have 10 people in the room today. So we're gonna have 5 pairs, 2. It's gonna be 4 minutes each. So you can keep track of time with a timer on your phone. So everybody has the same equal opportunity to speak. And basically it's just to quickly introduce yourself to your partner, your name and your organization. And then if you can describe a great experience that you've had lately. It can be personal or professional. Personal is even better, so we can know each other besides a respective role in the organization. And then also what attracted you to join this webinar. And then when you come back after 8 minutes, we're going to type in the chat box what attracted you to join this webinar. All right, so Matthias, you can put us into those breakout rooms.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Hello, Moise. There is.
Welcome back, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. So if you can just type into the chat box, take 1 minute to say what attracted you to join this webinar. You know, if you're working in a particular country, in a particular commodity, or just take 1 minute to write down what's interesting for you, particularly on farmer support system. Are you interested in how to apply it for palm oil or for deforestation, or what is it that you're interested? So we can take 1 minute for that, and then we're going to get into the introducing the role play. And I hope the check-in was a nice way to start for you connecting with others. And if you don't know what's this webinar about, that's fine as well. So incentives for smallholders to improve their sustainability practice. Our farmer support system could contribute to these hands. Thanks, Surin. Very useful. Don't be shy, guys. Yes, improvement towards sustainable development goals. Yeah, and what we're going to present today is applicable to commodities, but to the agricultural sector in general as well. Well, I'm going to continue while you type into the chat box the introduction. So I would like to learn more about farmer support system to suggest better incentives for the farmers, palm oil and rubber, and what platform are being used to support work with smallholders. Excellent. Can you go to the next slide, Matthias, please? All right. So reinventing farmer support systems for the 2030 agenda. So you might be asking why this title for a workshop today and why UNDP developed that guidance. Rini, are you here? Can I ask you to read the quote from the UN Secretary General that you can see on the slide?
Yes. You just want me to read the quote?
Yeah, just to read the quote, yeah.
Okay, so the quote says, "It is abundantly clear that a much deeper, faster, and more ambitious response is needed to unleash the social and economic transformation needed to achieve our 2030 goals." That is the quote from Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations.
Thank you, and I'm very happy to see your photo on Zoom, which is including one of the SDGs. That's when we were in Peru together. So that's great. So as you know, the 2030 agenda has 17 SDGs, and each of them, they're representing complex systems. Climate, food, health, cities, and all of them have this huge network of stakeholders working on those systems. And if you want to achieve progress on this agenda, we need a departure from the traditional top-down linear approach to change, and we need to bring in innovative and adaptive approach to engage this network of stakeholders towards a shared vision. And so this guidance, you can see on the right, the photo, that's the cover of the guidance that we've launched on Earth Day in April 2020. and that we disseminate internally and externally. It's really a guidance for practitioners on how to strengthen support systems, but in bringing those innovative and collaborative approach on the ground, so that you can improve, livelihoods and protecting vulnerable ecosystems. So that's what we are interested upon, And next slide, please. So everybody's using a bit the word system change at the moment. And when we talk about, food systems and farmer support systems and all those things, it's been using a lot internally and across organizations. But what does it mean exactly? Transformational change has received more and more attention recently, even more so in the context of COVID-19, because it's been showing that everything is interconnected, basically. So on this slide, basically it's like we all want to collaborate, we all want transformational change, and we all want improved support systems for farmers to help them grow more sustainably, adapt to climate change, stop deforestation, etc. So in your comments, you've put, how we can support smallholders, what incentives are needed, how they can grow more sustainably. So we all want that, and we all have very good intentions, lots of experience, and lots to offer. But what does it mean exactly to work systemically and how to apply this concept? So in this diagram, you can see 3 key elements. If you want to work systemically, you need to first understand the system. What does it mean, farmer support systems? What are the root cause of the problem, going beyond symptoms, looking at all the connections across the different parts. And that's one part, understanding. Then you need to convene world system group and do community building, identify who's in the system, and then working on the relationship. And then you can see on the left, another way that is not talked so much about, that we feel is one of the most important, is what are your ways of working? How do you build trust and relationships between the people in your system? How are you bringing an adaptive mindset? How do you work from the emerging future? And how do you empower people to facilitate, to lead, etc.? And so these tools that we developed is really looking at is guiding you through these different elements. And so how do you convince stakeholders around the issue of farmer support? What framework can be used to assess systems, and what ways of working are needed to bring collaborative mindsets and values for transformation. So it's not just focusing on the technical content, like how do you train a farmer, or how do you improve the capacity of extension workers, but how do you bring the actors in the system to change mindsets? And I think that's a bit the added value of that document. So it's not a guidance about how do you train farmer. And so rather than me explaining in details and with many slides what's the document, we're going to do a role play where we're going to experience some of the collaborative activities that are proposed in that guidance to assess and strengthen farmer support systems. So next slide, please. If you have questions or anything, you can write into the chat. I will try to read at the same time the things. Thank you all for putting why you're joining the webinars today. All right. So basically, welcome everyone to the multi-stakeholder farmer support forum of the fictional Republic of Combesi. So that's the role play we're going to play today. In that forum that we've created, we have a range of actors from the system. We have people from the government, the Ministry of Agriculture, Environment, National Planning. We have the commodity boards. We have development partners, supply chain actors, civil society organizations, and farmers. And I'm going to give you a bit of context first, because we are going to play the roles of those different categories. Some of you are going to be government, some of you are going to be farmers, some of you are going to be a private sector. And so in the Republic of Combesi, the first export is cocoa. It's a very strategic crop for the country. It's the first export. And our focus together as a collective is sustainable cocoa production. We're interested in sustainability, climate change adaptation, and deforestation, because cocoa has been in the spotlight for deforestation. And there's different service providers providing farmer support in the country. One is the Cocoa Commodity Board. We have cocoa companies also providing supports, and we have NGOs providing supports. But each of them have different priorities, strengths, and weaknesses. And so, the role play is cocoa, but you can imagine how it will look like for palm oil. There's also a lot of palm oil and rubber in the Republic of Kambezi. Next slide. So in the guidance from UNDP, we propose different stage to work on farmer support as a group. And those 4 stages, like, you set up that farmer support forum, then you do an assessment that is made of a diagnosis study and a scorecard that I'm going to introduce. And then you develop together a collective action plan around how you can strengthen your farmer support system. And then you go into implementation. So in this group, in this role play, we've already conducted a quantitative diagnostic study to provide background information on the performance of the system. And now what we need to do together is a qualitative assessment of the systems from, I said, the NGOs, the Cocoa Commodity Board, and the government, using a particular scorecard that we've developed. But before we do that, let me just share some fictional results from the quantitative study that we've done. Matthias, next slide. So we basically did a study to understand what was the existing farmer support system in the Republic of Kambezi. And we used a specific analytical framework that we developed at UNDP that is in this guidance. And basically, it's presenting, when we think about farmer support, we often think about training. How are we going to train farmers to adapt better agricultural practice, or how we can improve the capacity of the extension workers, etc. And here we've developed an analytical framework that is made of 15 elements and 5 components, which is looking at the enabling environment. So for example, what is shaping the context of farmer support interventions? What is the organizational capacity? Like the numbers of staff, the training levels, experience, the performance incentives. What are the advisory methods, the methods used for training, how it's being delivered, what technologies are being used, budgeting and financing, and M&E and learning, how performance is being measured, and how do you, looking at the percentage of adoption of better practices from farmers, etc. And so this is the first things that this guidance bring, is this analytical framework. So that's when you talk to stakeholders about strengthening farmer support system, you go beyond just looking at farmer training, but you have a broader holistic view to look at things. So we did a study on that, and next slide, please. And we've realized that in the particular case of the Republic of Kambezi, each service providers have different priority, and that might relate to your particular case with TNC, ProForest, or UNDP. We have the National Cocoa Commodity Board. They're interested in increasing productivity. And the key strength that they have is that they have a very strong regulatory framework, and they can operate at scale, because they are part of the government, they have the possibility to go to scale. The private sector, they're really interested in the volume and quality of cocoa purchased. And the strength is they developed for the Republic of Kambezi an action plan on cocoa and deforestation, for example. And the NGOs, the priority is the numbers of farmers trained and improving livelihoods, and the strength is the quality of trainers that they have, because they can deliver in-depth training. But overall, what we've seen is that there's a misaligned interest and agenda. There's no common vision or collective action, and there's actually a lack of shared understanding of the key issues to be addressed. So you might relate to that again in a particular country. The productivity is very low for cocoa in the Republic of Kambezi, but the study showed that there's a potential to increase productivity by tenfold. You can see the picture on the left. This is like 250 kilogram per hectare, and on the right is like 3,500 kilogram per hectare. Next slide. And, you know, we realized through that study that actually we are competing across organizations, and we are coexisting or competing. You can read on the slide, competition is competing for clients, resource partners, and public attention. There's a lot of competitions, egos, duplication of efforts, and we are working in silos. And an example, for example, is that each organization, each service provider is developing training material for farmers on climate smart cocoa, on cocoa and deforestation, on sustainable cocoa production, but these training materials are developed separately for each organization. And so if you read what is, Danang, can you read, for example, what is written on the collaborate?
Yeah, sure. Longer team interaction based on shared mission, goals, also shared decision-making and resources.
Yeah, so we're very far from there in the Republic of Kambezi. And so we're competing for donor money and resources, which is a bit of an issue. Next slide. And the study also looked at, they made a study on trust, and they basically looked at the cocoa boards, the NGOs delivering training, and the private sector, and we realized that none of those three institutions delivering farmer support is seen as both competent and ethical. You know, the perception from stakeholders that we interview is that they basically serve the interest of the few over everyone, and each institution is not seen as a good partner for the other. But if you're looking at transformational change, you can see the quote that change happens at the speed of trust. So how can we bring more trust into the process together? Next slide, and last slide before we go into the exercise. And what that study shows also is that understanding the connections between distinct areas is very crucial to emerge stronger from the COVID pandemic, and system thinking can help. You can see on that diagram that how is the farm connected to transport, to market, to knowledge, to research, to culture, to climate, to technology, to community, to wildlife, to food, to water, etc., etc. And if we want to build stronger farmer support system thinking can help us achieve that. So there's a small video that Matthias, can you show us? It's 5 minutes, and it's going to show you why system thinking is important for farmer support. So 1 second, the time that we put the video on. Are you still with me? Still following? Yeah?
Yep, Nicolas.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. All right, let's look at that video together.
This animation is about systems thinking and what it means for our work. We hope it encourages you to look deeper into the accompanying guide. Traditionally, we have been encouraged to solve problems by focusing on and developing solutions to individual parts of a problem. A log frame or a theory of change, for instance, encourages us to map out a tidy sequence of change that will solve developmental problems.
But reality is rarely as simple as that. To illustrate this, consider the old saying, if you teach a man to fish, you can feed him forever. First of all, it's just as likely that that man is a woman, of course.
Many factors may mean that the simple activity of training someone to fish will not be enough to give them a livelihood. Climate change could be affecting the availability of fish. Pollution from urban areas could be killing the fish. Rich elites could be using illegal nets, leading to overfishing. A lack of control over household income could limit the benefit obtained by women fishers. Irrigation for agricultural development could threaten water resources.
On the other hand, many factors could open up new opportunities. A company may open up a new fish processing plant. Demand for fish may grow from expanding urban areas. The reality for the fisherman or fisherwoman is that their livelihood is determined by how well they can manage these challenges and opportunities, which may change every year. When you examine any of these issues separately, you will see that they themselves are made up of an interaction of many different factors. Consider pollution. There are obvious causes, but underneath these, there could be another set of causative factors. And there could be conditions that help this to happen. Now consider how uneven power develops. Pollution may perpetuate poverty in a number of ways, and in doing so, it may contribute to diminishing the influence and power that people have, going full circle and further reinforcing the problem of pollution. You can unpack any of the problems facing the fishermen in the same way, and you will find a similar complex web of stakeholders and issues that interact with each other.
These factors and the way they relate to each other is a system. As you can see, systems can get quite complicated. In the case of the fisherwomen, for instance, what issue would make the biggest difference? Is it improving household decision-making? Is it curbing pollution? Is it improving the capacity of women? Or should the target be reducing women's time poverty? Or improving government policy? Or addressing climate change?
Things definitely seemed simpler and more certain when we just trained fishermen. But without an understanding of the bigger picture, it is easier for us to make mistakes. It's easier for us to develop interventions that have no impact, and it's easier for us to set off a chain of events that actually has a negative impact. But there are strategies we can adopt that enable us to design effective programs even in the face of such complex systems. First of all, we should make an effort to understand the systems we are dealing with. This will not give total certainty, but it will give us ideas about how to start, and it will reduce the chances of unintended consequences.
Starting small scale is important. Developing a range of interventions that allows us to test theories about what will happen when we intervene helps us deal with uncertainty. Many of our interventions will fail, but that helps us understand how the system works and increases our ability, long-term, to have greater impact. Working with other stakeholders allows different skill sets and ideas to be brought to bear on a problem. It allows you to operate at different levels of the system.
Working with others also enables you to challenge your own preconceived ideas. So bring in people who challenge your perception on what is happening. Don't just pick the people you usually work with. Working in this way takes time and good facilitation, but it can lead to changes in power dynamics and structural change.
To make this succeed, we have to work differently. This requires us to learn how to fail quickly, safely and purposefully, and let go of preconceived ideas. This means loosening our control over things, to be prepared to adapt as things go along. Our role then is to create space and opportunities for local stakeholders to design solutions. To find out more, take a look at the Systems Thinking Guide that accompanies this animation. It will give you more ideas, examples, and links to other resources.
So, yeah, back to the slides. So I hope this video was informative about how do you move from looking at farmer training to trying to understand the big picture. And you realize that the ways of working are as important as the technical solutions. You know, how do you bring those safe space for innovation, and with what facilitation, and how do you bring that collaborative mindsets and letting go of the illusion of control. So how do we work with complexity? That's something that also is very important. So next slide. So we've done that diagnostic study, and we've learned that collaboration is important if we want to strengthen farmer support system, and we've learned that system thinking can help us as well. So we're going to do now a more qualitative exercise as a group, using a scorecard that we developed as part of that guidance. And so you receive also a copy of that scorecard in the invite, but there's normally 60 questions structured around the analytical framework that I presented briefly before, like the enabling environment, the advisory methods, etc. And so the best way to experience that scorecard is to do it ourselves. And so who has already used Mentimeter? If you can raise your hands. Have you used already Mentimeter? No, never. All right. So basically, you can go to, you can see on the slide, menti.com. Take your phone and type menti.com. All right, and then there's a code there, which is 659024, and you click submit. And Matthias is going to share at the same time the thing, the slides. So this is one of the collaborative tools you can use, especially now in the context of COVID, and the beauty of it is that it's anonymous. So it's, in some countries like Indonesia or other countries, sometimes people are shy to speak their truth about what they think about the system and how they perceive government or private sector, civil society. So here it's anonymous. Matthias, can you just share the screen? So we can see. All right. So you've already put some results. So you can type which organization you're representing. Are you part of the government? So remember, it's a role play. And if you type government, you will have to play for the role of the government in the next questions. So if you're familiar with what the government think on pharmaceutical system, you're going to be playing that role. I don't see how many people responded, Matthias. Can you see?
Yeah, it says 7 people.
7
people.
And we are 13 in the group. If you need any help connecting, just let us know. We lost Winnie, she's back. We have 11. So I can see you get it. It's quite simple. So this is great. We are in this meeting of the Pharma Support Forum. It's virtual today, but I'm very happy to see that we have a balanced group of stakeholders today with us. We have, I cannot see, let me go on the full view. We have 8% cocoa farmers. Maybe Matthias, you can read for me, I cannot see well.
Yeah, I can do that for you. So 8%, we have representation of 8% of cocoa farmers, 17% are from the government, 17% from private sector, 17% from the civil society, and 42% are from development partners.
Right. So we have way too many development partners, but as a facilitator, when you're trying to bring stakeholders, you want to have a balance, but this is not too bad. We have many meetings where private sector is not there or cocoa farmers are not there. So we have pretty good. So we're going to do the assessment together now. So next slide. So here we're looking at the performance of the system as a whole, because we're interested to change the farmer support system in the country, like in Indonesia or Malaysia. So do you think there's a level of, how is the level of shared vision for national, subnational extension services? Do you think the private sector agrees with the views of the government and the government agrees with the view of the cocoa farmers? I see you very fast, so that's really nice. And the good thing is we can see here on Mentimeter, it's anonymous, so we don't know like a particular name, but we know from which categories of stakeholders you belong to. So if government thinks it's actually there is a very nice vision, but then the cocoa farmers thinks that vision is really bad, you can know through this type of voting tools. But overall, guys, you think that it's pretty limited or very limited. We don't have a shared vision in the country, in Indonesia or Malaysia, about what a good extension system could be. Next slide. And is there an inclusion of SDG objectives beyond productivity into the vision? Or are we only talking about productivity when we talk about, training farmers on palm oil, on sustainability? What are we talking about? Are we talking about SDGs? No, very limited. So development partners think it's limited. The cocoa farmers think it's no. Cocoa farmers have a more strict answer than government here, etc. Next slide. And so, advisory methods, which is another component of the analytical framework, is there a national curricula to train farmers on sustainable commodity production in the country? Very limited. Ooh, we have one good. So we have an outlier that thinks that we have a very good national curriculum to train farmers on sustainable commodity production. And it's from the government. Maybe it's the person who wrote the national curriculum. All right, so we have different views. And so the way this tool work normally in reality is you can do it in a meeting room, you can do it virtually. There's many ways to do that. But the role of the facilitator normally is to capture those differences. Is like, as a group, what the private sector think on the national curriculum. There might be a curriculum for climate smart cocoa in the Republic of Combesi, but some think it's good, some people think it's not good. So it's not just qualitative questions, it raises a debate. But because it's anonymous, people can speak a bit more their truth. Next slide. We're going a bit faster now that you understand the system. Is the frequency of training provided to farmers adequate enough for farmers to adopt sustainable practices? It's limited, so can definitely be improved. Nobody thinks it's satisfactory or good. So as a group, we have a kind of a qualitative understanding of where we stand in the country. Next slide. And our farmers have access to inputs like fertilizer credit, seeds, shade trees. Do you think it's adequate? So again, one person put that it's really good. So maybe it's interesting to ask that person why does he think it's really good? And maybe we can learn from that person about what they are doing well in the organizations in terms of providing farmer access to input. I can see that cocoa farmers put no as well. So we can then ask cocoa farmers, what are the issues? So it's really a qualitative exercise to create a debate. Next slide. And the beauty of it is that it's in real time. And are we using modern information technology in support of extension activities? Are we using mobile phone applications to deliver key messages to farmers in the country? No, we have, again, different views. Some people say it's limited, that means it exists. Some people say no. Again, much to be improved on information technology. Next slide. I'm going a bit faster now. And this exercise is also an opportunity to start thinking about what could be improved in the system. If you go back to your initial questions in the chat box, how to provide incentives, etc. So in terms of training to farmers, advisory methods, what do you think could be improved? If you can just take a few minutes to think about what could be improved in the Republic of Kambezi for cocoa. So you see, the great thing here again is instead of having everybody in the room talking one by one and having a big debate, you can see directly in real time, we need to have an integrated approach. We need PPPs. We need access to technical and financial support. We need farmer field school. We need to go beyond training on productivity, a more bottom-up approach, etc., etc. National intervention and commitment from various ministries to legalize. So you can see that it's kind of dynamic way of looking at the issues in quite fast, market access for farmers. And so the facilitator now can then create a discussion about what does it mean market access for farmers? How can we strengthen market access to farmers? And have a detailed discussion on that. Next slide. So a quick check-in. Are you still with me? And do you have a clear understanding of how the scorecard is working? Mm. 4.8 are still with me. Well, that's pretty good. Pretty good results. Excellent. Well, thank you for playing that first role play on the qualitative assessment. Matthias, can you go back to the presentation? And so, next slide. If you can just pause 1 minute to reflect and write in the chat box maybe one thing that you liked about the assessment exercise on Mentimeter or you don't like, and one question that you have about what you have heard so far, if any. And then we can all read together the comments and questions on the chat box. Here it's not anonymous, but we can find a way to make it anonymous in the future, so nobody's shy. Anything that surprised you? Save time? User-friendly? And remember, normally, this is going to be like a full day exercise where you go through all the questions. And it's all about the facilitation. You need a good facilitator who's able to extract the important information. And, because it's qualitative, you're going to have different views. And this is what you need to extract, how the views are different if you want to have a collaborative ways of working. It is new for me, very powerful online as a brainstorming tool, innovative and open-minded. So, that's a bit what we're trying to do is how do you bring those innovative tools for people to interact? And for information, we piloted that in Indonesia with Rini last year, and we didn't have Mentimeter, and we did a more traditional meeting face-to-face. And we realized that in the context of Indonesian culture, it was quite difficult for, we were doing that at subnational level, for governments, to say, for private sector to say what they don't like with the government and vice versa. And like in any group, there's already, if you have like 30 people in the room, there's always 2-3 people that talks more than others and that take all the space. And having a tool like Mentimeter gives equal voice to everybody. All right. Okay, 1 more minute to write down if you have any questions about what you've heard so far. Useful for open discussion when there is debate, conflict, levels of power among participants. Oh, you don't have any questions. That's good. Has anyone done a stock take of extension services available to farmers in specific countries? So here, the way it works, the guidance is different, is basically, you see what I presented before with that diagnostic study, is that you're mixing a quantitative exercise with a qualitative exercise. So the Mentimeter exercise is very qualitative. But before that, you do a quantitative study to look at what is the current reality of extension services in that particular country. But what you will realize is that in most countries, there is so much written, so much study already. You know, in the context of Indonesia, there are many, many studies on extension services and how to improve, so many legislation. But sometimes you're missing the collaborative mindsets to translate those studies into an action. But what this tool is aiming to bring as well is best practices from other countries. You know, like if in Colombia, they've managed to bring incentives for farmers, for cocoa farmers to coffee farmers to have sustainable practices, what can we learn from Colombia in the context of palm oil in Malaysia or vice versa? Use different color code for each categories. Yeah, definitely, that's something that can be done. Normally, you can put photos. All right, excellent. Okay, so next slide. So imagine we're still playing that role play, and we are now, you know, we've done that Mentimeter exercise 2 weeks ago, and we've completed the assessment stage as a group. So we know what exists on cocoa in the Republic of Kambezi. We know a difference and strengths and weaknesses, and you know, we have a shared understanding of the key strengths and weaknesses of the different service provider. We have started to explore what needs to be improved. We have a kind of a baseline of the current situation, but also through this facilitation and these innovative ways of interacting, we start slowly having closer relationships, you know, and we're building trust along the way. So I'm a bit more connected to Rivdan. I'm a bit more connected to Bruno that I didn't know before. I'm more connected to Lang Lang and Danang, and you know, we talk during coffee break. So we're building this trust and relationship. Mariana is friends with Rini. Dario is also part of the group, and so you know, this is also very important if you want to strengthen your system. And we also better understand how to apply system thinking concepts to the particular case of sustainable cocoa in Kambezi. And maybe also last week, we've done a system mapping exercise together to complement our assessment. So overall, we feel today empowered to talk freely in a safe space, which was not the case 1 month ago. So we're meeting again now. Imagine this is another meeting, and we're meeting for the next stage that is proposed in UNDP guidance. So now we're interested to what can we do together to improve the situation? How can we build together a collective action plan, an investment framework for strengthening the system? What innovative solution we can start experimenting and testing now, you know? And so this process of collective decision making, we do it also through the Farmer Support Forum. And so, for example, you've seen in Mentimeter that we're not using appropriate information technology. We don't have a national curriculum on sustainable cocoa production for the Republic of Combesi. The training delivered to farmers is not developed enough. So what can we do together? And so you can see a template on that slide. That's just for information, where that template is also presented according to the analytical framework that I presented. So what we can do collectively on the enabling environments, what can we do collectively on advisory methods, what can we do, etc., etc. And so, when you think system thinking, you need to balance also the need between a plan and outcomes and predefined outcomes, where being completely letting go of control and be open for testing and learning from failure and experimenting. So you don't want to develop for 3 years a collective action plan that in 3 years will be obsolete, because by then we have COVID-19 or whatever we have. So we need to be adaptive, and the facilitator will help the group think about those concepts. So next slide. So we're going to use another tool now. I cannot see many of you in videos, so I cannot ask you to raise your hands. But are you familiar with Mural? Can you write in chat if you've already used it? No? Nope. Nope. Yes, Dario? Yes, use it many times. No? All right, so Mural is just one of the tools out there, which is a kind of a virtual whiteboard, like where you can put post-its, but you can do it virtually. It's just one of the existing software that exists. There are many others. There's another one called Miro. There's many out there. But basically, it's a digital collaboration tool that we're going to use for the role playing. And Matthias, can you share the link in the chat box in terms of the Mural? So there's a link in the chat box. If you can click there, and then I'm going to share my screen to show you what we're going to do together. All right. Let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, let me wait for everybody to connect. Matthias, you can explain maybe the thing about not seeing the...
Yes, when you get into the web page, into the whiteboard, you will be able to see everybody's cursors going around. So the way to take away the cursors of others so you can concentrate better is to hover over your animal underneath on the bottom. If you hover, if you go, maybe you can do it on your screen, Nico. If you do that, just hover over it. So you just hover over it. Does it show up? All right. So if you click on it or hover over it, you can see the option hide cursors. So if you click on that, it will remove everybody's cursors from the whiteboard. So it's easier to concentrate.
Excellent. How many people we have connected? Can you see? We have 8 online users. So I think almost everybody is connected. How many we have in the webinar, Matthias? All right, so
we have 11. We have 11 people. 11.
So basically, this is a whiteboard, yeah? Imagine you're in a room, you go to the wall and you put post-its together as a group collectively. I see people are starting to move post-its. So wait, before doing anything, before touching anything and putting back the post-its in the box, there's different things I need to show you. So, for example, you don't need necessarily to zoom in and zoom out. I'm going to put at the right place the thing. If you hover on a post-it and you click X, maybe you can see here on my screen, where it's X, can you see that?
Yes.
Zoom in. So you don't need to put a post-it bigger or smaller. You can just zoom in. You put your mouse on it and then you click X, learning, click X, empathy. If you want to write on a post-it, you just need to double click on it. You double click and then you can write whatever you want. You don't know yet what to write, so just bear with me. And if you want to move your post-its, you can see here, I'm moving the post-its somewhere, all right? Normally there's enough post-its for everybody, we're not too many. If you want to add one, you can see on the left, I'm taking a post-it here. Can you see live what I'm doing? Yeah?
Yes.
I'm moving a post-it in my space here. But I can also add an image. Here, I'm going to image of palm oil. Oop, I'm going to bring an image of palm oil here. All right, so you can do many things, and we don't have the time today to look at all the nice things you can do on Mural. But we're in the role play, and we're going to do a collective action plan together. And maybe, hopefully, you've realized by now that when we think about working together, it's not only the technical content, like how do you train farmers, but it's also a ways of working that I've mentioned. And so I'm interested as a group that we look at, before brainstorming about how to strengthen advisory methods, that we look also at our ways of working. And basically, this worksheet is to facilitate a conversation with the members of the Farmer Support Country Forum about how do we want to work together, the private sector, the government, civil society, and what do we expect from one another. And this is useful to do before you do any visioning exercise or collective action planning, because you put the boundaries about how do you want to work together. And I think that's quite useful. So for example, you can see in a ways of working, the first thing we can think about is what do we value? You can see the outline. What qualities and behaviors are important to us as individuals? Which one do we want to share together in the Republic of Kambezi as we move forwards in developing that better farmer support? I've put some, transparency, trust. We want to bring empathy into what we do. So think for 1-2 minutes, what type of value do we want as a group in the Farmer Support Forum to bring when we work together? So double click on the post-its if you want to write, and you can hover and click on X. So someone wrote common goals. We want mutual understanding, respect, connections, discipline,
Nico, should we focus just on the first one, or can we go to the next ones as well?
Yeah, I'm going there. So here I want to highlight that a lot of the time when we do those meetings, we forget that fundamental step, again, on the ways of working. But if we spend sufficient time in putting those boundaries when we start and building trust and relationships, then it's easier to go into the technical content. So, on the ways of working, the second is how do you communicate? So based on the values we define in step one. So obviously here we have only 10 minutes, 20 minutes, but normally the facilitators will then in the Farmer Support Forum do a debate on the values and what are the common values that we have and put them, And then based on the values we define, how do we want to communicate? When, how, and with what channels? We want to avoid overload, because we're all busy, but we want to communicate with respect. So how do you want to communicate together? We want formal and informal communication. We need to be succinct, etc., etc. So I think you got the point here. I'm just gonna, I know you want to put lots of post-its, but it's coming. And then you can continue, how are we gonna collaborate? And how are we gonna measure work, What does success look like? Maybe that's an interesting one to do for 2 minutes. What does success look like for us to have stronger farmer support system in the Republic of Combesi, and how we will know we've reached that? So for example, we can do a visioning exercise. We can have a happy farmer. We have more money. So if you can think 2-3 minutes about what success will look like for you in terms of cocoa farmers adopting more sustainable practices, or climate smart cocoa, reducing deforestation. So increasing farmers' income, increasing yields, member satisfaction. Again, this is in real time, so this is the beauty of those collaborative tools. You have a farmer insurance system, reduced deforestation. I think one point to highlight here is that some of those success, might not be surprising for people in the room. We want to have increased farmer income or reducing deforestation. But the important aspect is how do we discuss this collaboratively and what common values and common vision, shared vision we have. Because then you're not focusing on the difference that we have between private sector, government, and cocoa farmers, but we focus on what we have in common. Everybody wants to improve livelihoods and everybody wants to protect ecosystems, but we might have different ways to get there. And so this type of exercise bring, alignments of agenda in better field practices, et cetera, et cetera. So I wish we had 3 hours together, but we don't. So still in the ways of working, you can also look at how do we recognize another, how do we make decisions, how do we prioritize work, handle conflict, etc. So once you've done that, it could be like a one-day meeting where you go through all these values. Then at the end of the day, you can make a commitment to one another. How are we going to show up differently as individuals and team members? And what behavior change can we hold one another accountable to? those are important aspects because it's all about shifting mindsets if you want to strengthen your system. So those commitments are very important. I'm committing myself to listen more. I'm committing myself to understand new perspectives, etc. But I know a lot of you are farmer support experts, and so you're eager to go into the meat. What does it mean for farmer support? It's basically, once you've done that, those ways of working, you can shift into a brainstorming more about farmer support specifically, where, let's take advisory methods, for example. And we've done the assessment and we know that we can improve training, etc. So you take the group into a brainstorming. And the principle of brainstorming is that you don't judge, yeah? And if you do it in a group and everybody gives their idea, people are saying, oh, I don't agree with this idea, or I don't agree with that. You don't want to do that in your brainstorming. You want to go for volume. You want to encourage wild ideas, because that's how you bring innovation. The sky is the limit. It's fine to have a wish list first, and then you can prioritize, But so basically, if we do that here, how might, and the way I phrase the question is, how might we strengthen existing advisory methods to create lasting improvements in productivity as well as social and environmental impact? The question is phrased as, how might we, because it means, how can we work collectively on that? Private sector, civil society, government, rather than me as an individual. And so, again, there's some examples. We can co-create a new national extension strategy with a shared vision. We can establish closer links with universities. We can review the decentralization process that is not working specifically. So if you can brainstorm for a few minutes about, in the Republic of Kambezi, what will you do as a collective to strengthen advisory methods, for example? And we can do that for enabling environment, for budgeting, etc. We can align training service providers, empower extension workers, establish working groups, joint committees. Sorry, you can see my chat. establish multi-stakeholder working group, supporting regulations development. All right, so, you know, as you can imagine, we can spend 2-3 hours on any of those elements, you know, and topics. How do you improve training for extension workers? How can you improve advisory methods and financing, etc.? So here is just to give you a feel for what tools you can use to bring a collaborative approach. And so normally, I'm conscious of time. What you can do next, and we won't have time today, but you can then, as a group, prioritize. You know, we've put a long list of things, and that might feel a bit like a wish list, but we know we don't have money in the Republic of Combesi to do all those things, or we know we don't have the capacity. And so we can prioritize about, you know, is it very high or very low importance? And is it feasible? Is it low or high? You know, will we have the money for doing that? You know, setting up a working group is important, and the feasibility is very high, very easy. But if we want to get $2 million to do farmer field school all over the country in Combesi, what's the feasibility of doing that? So you do that exercise together with the team. So this is one way where you start building a collective action plan. Thank you all. Sorry, I know it's a bit rushed. We have only 90 minutes together, but I think you get a feel for what it could look like. If you can put back the slides, we have only one last slide, Matthias, and then we're going to do a quick checkout. So, you know, basically what we've done together is start building what a collective action plan could look like. You know, we have ways of working together. How do we want to work collectively? We start identifying the key issues we want to work on. And then as a group in the country, in Combesi, we prioritize together what are the key issues. And on that slide, you can see in the guidance, it gives you an example of what type of meeting will be needed to develop that collective action plan. You need, you know, you will have specific task force. Basically, you've identified 2 priorities. That is, I don't know, financing, innovative financing model, and advisory method. You can create a task force for that. But financing, what we realize in most countries is that financing is the key issue. And sometimes you conduct reality check on the budget needs. You need to prioritize, and you need to bring experts that knows about what are those innovative financing mechanisms for strengthening pharmaceutical systems. So the guidance is explaining, you know, how you can bring those guys in, and etc. And hopefully what I managed to do today is to show you that how important it is to create a safe space in your country with the stakeholders you're working with for developing innovative solutions collectively. It's not like an expert that is doing a study, but it's how do you work collectively as a group to strengthen your system, and how do you build trust and relationships along the way. And so how do you move gradually from one thing I've learned last week is like, I like that word, is how do you move from stakeholders to seed holders? You know, it's like where your partners are now holding the necessary seeds for transformational change. I really like that thing. We're not working with stakeholders, but we're working with seed holders. And so, yeah, how do we do that? That's a bit what I try to explain today. So we have 5 minutes for a checkout. And in that checkout, you know, obviously we didn't have time to address all questions you might have, but the channel is open, yeah? I'm here, you can connect with me, you can connect with Matthias for any questions you have. But for the checkouts, next slide, Matthias. If you can write in the chat box, just you key insight from today. If there was one thing to remember, what will be your key insight from this session? And if you or your organization will be interested to apply such a methodology, and if yes, in which country, on what commodities, with which partner. If you're working on palm oil in Malaysia, is that something you could imagine collaborating on, etc. So one key insight from today, and if you would be interested to apply such a methodology. And of course, we just touched the surface on what the methodology can offer. Thank you, Serene. You can connect with me anytime. Today was really about presenting again, the ways of working, but you will see in the guidance that there's some very, very specific tools applied to farmer support, like the analytical framework is presented in detail, with a lot of useful reference for farmer support strengthening. And I think you might also have realized that this is applicable not only for farmer support, but for many of the issues you might be working with. Yeah, an overview of the scorecards. There's 60 questions, and the scorecard is adaptable to your local reality. What we've realized also is that some questions might not be relevant, that are relevant in Indonesia might not be relevant in Malaysia. And so there's flexibility in terms of course, translating the scorecard in local language, but adapting to the particular issues you're facing in terms of sustainability, etc. Thank you, Riftan. Yes, it's a multi-stakeholder approach. The way the guidance is framed is for national level, extension services, but also subnational level. And for example, in Indonesia, we've tried to explore this approach at the district level. You can do it at a provincial level, at the district level. It depends a bit on the level of decentralization that you have in your country. More guidance on Mentimeter and rural, interesting tools, useful for COVID situation. Yeah, going into the substance of innovative models. Yes. So that's the part, the different parts is that's what we call the what and the how. The what is the substance of what are those innovative models that exist and how we can really strengthen the systems, and the how is those ways of working. And the intersection between the two is interesting. Yeah, idea for a future webinar. Yes, just for information. So in terms of time, we're running out of time, but just for you to know, we are setting up a kind of, how do you call it, Matthias? A working group on farmer support. Yeah, and it's completely open at the moment for the next 6 months to 1 year. What questions are we interested to explore together as a group, going into, for example, innovative financial models or innovative advisory methods, etc. And so if you're interested to be part of the group and to continue the discussion with us on farmer support, just write it here in the chat box. Maybe I can add that to the question tomorrow. But if you're interested to continue the discussion, then we will invite you for the remaining webinars that might be much more on the substance. All right. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you all for coming. And this is just the start of the journey together. And we can co-create together what type of webinar we want in the future on farmer support. So with that, have a good day. It's 11:33 in Hong Kong. We are 3 minutes late and I can go for coffee. So very nice meeting you all and have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Nico. Thank you, everybody, for coming. See you soon.
Thank you all.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you, Bruno.
Thank
You
you,
too.
Bruno.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Very interesting. Thanks.
Ciao.
Thank you, Dario.